Hello, and welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about winning at D&D. Before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks that know what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we like to talk about games. This episode is one that I have been interested in doing for quite a long time. And it came after... I don't even really remember what happened. I just, happened upon a thread on Reddit and the D&D Reddit somewhere where people were talking about this concept that I couldn't understand. They actually kept saying bro SR, and I was like, what's broser? And then I came to realize that was describing a specific kind of person who was an evangelist for a way of playing the game called OSR, which is Old School Revival, which was sort of headlined by this guy named Jeffro Johnson, who wrote this book called How to Win at D&D. That was when I went down this kind of rabbit hole and I got to the bottom of it. That's sort of what I found. I don't actually think How to Win at D&D is as comprehensive as I was hoping it would be in terms of explaining kind of what this mindset is, but we have done our due diligence, read the pamphlet. It's maybe 25 pages.
We have educated ourselves. We have read the literature.
Exactly, right. It's supposed to be, I was trying to figure this out. It's supposed to be the first couple of chapters of a longer book, but it seems as though the longer book never got printed. So...
yeah, that doesn't surprise me, really.
But I think I would probably say the thesis of How to Win a D&D and the OSR mindset in general is fundamentally reactionary, right? It is the current way is bad. The answer is to go back to Redfern.
To return, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I am a little bit less I'd be a little bit less harsh to that, I think. Just I think there is a sense of and this is kind of a classic thing is is when we modernized the systems, we lost some things along the way, and that has been to the kind of experience's detriment. Which we were talking about this before we got on, but the strongest version, or I think the kind of most numerically demonstrable version of this was the 3.5 era. Linear fighter, quadratic caster thing, where shaving off a lot of kind of the extra stuff from AD&D that was stuff fighters getting armies and fortresses, and the game kind of scaling out widthwise, and old types of D&D used to also go wide at high level, right? As opposed to just whereas basically every game goes deep, goes tall, right? To use Civilization terms, every character goes tall in modern D&D, whereas in the older ones, the characters that would, by the nature of their class, get less individual power went wide and just commanded more forces. And I think that's a kind of a numerical way of pointing at some of this kind of some things were lost from the old systems. I will agree with you that I guess this BroSR term, I've not heard this term before, but it makes sense to kind of not only wanting to play the OSR, but telling you you're wrong for enjoying modern D&D makes some sense to me.
Yeah, it's funny. I find myself in a situation. I don't know. I guess we'll talk about kind of where we end up on this sort of spectrum. I find myself in this situation where I actually agree quite deeply, truly fundamentally. I truly fundamentally agree. I don't even want to couch it that much with essentially kind of the problem that he's sort of describing. I just think that his sort of solution to that problem is ridiculous. And I kind of just don't think that he understands even most of the argumentation that I think he uses is pretty poor at proving the point that he wants to, outside of I kind of don't know. There's a bunch of stuff to get into, but I feel like we have to kind of lay some groundwork before we get into there. I don't know where what's your high level? I'm trying to give a high level impression of what I think of all of this.
Yeah, my high level impression is that this is one way to solve the problem, but it's also a different type of game than I would prefer to play, right? Which is fine, right? This is so there is a game. This is going to be a weird tangent, but there's a game that happens every year. A bunch of games happen every year at Gen Con it's called something like Dungeon Crawl Madness or something. or like defeat the tower. It's basically you run through an old school adventure, and it's like one of these infamously hard and unfair dungeons. And every time one of your characters dies, they just like stamp dead on it with like this big comical stamp, and you wrote in how they died, and they hand you a new character sheet, and you keep going, right? And it feels like that is one type of way to play the game that isn't really in favor nowadays. And I don't begrudge people for enjoying that experience, right? Like I feel like, some people we play with, like Nick. I think Nick could enjoy that experience. Like, he wasn't born into that era of D&D. But I feel like he could enjoy that experience, right? Whereas people who are more invested in kind of the characterization elements, probably not so much. But the insistence that this is the correct way to play is a thing that grates on me a little bit. And, part of my priors here is I have also been reading for years and years The Angry DM, who while having very strong opinions about some of this stuff and thinking that some of the older things did things, address things in some ways better, also doesn't really like the OSR movement and thinks that they're all like, out of touch grognards who just kind of, want to do the old thing for the sake of doing the old thing. So that's interesting to me. Interesting to me too.
Yeah, my kind of criticism is even deeper than that in a way. I actually think that it doesn't even really stand, like in a certain sense. There's this version of the argument this OSR crowd makes that I just kind of think is on its face a little ridiculous about the nature of the game system itself. In a weird way, this is like sacred contract stuff, right? So for those of you who may not remember old episodes from this podcast from like 8 years ago, okay, Meg and I used to have this fight about this thing called the sacred contract, which was how often ought the DM to change the rules kind of with or without telling players, right, in ways like fudging rolls in order to make things go a certain way, right, essentially to kind of make certain gameplay alterations in order to affect like narrative ends would be the opposite, the way to put it. I used to be very pro this. I am no longer very pro this. Mango has successfully convinced me otherwise. Yeah, right?
just to make the term clear, sacred contract is a term that I came up with. If you Google this, nothing will show up except for our episode. Yeah. And the sacred contract is kind of the sacred contract is a sacred contract you make with the players that you will follow the rules, and because of that, fudging the rolls in my mind is breaking the sacred contract and is generally bad. Over the years, I'm probably less, fundamentalist, maybe is the best way to put it about this. Like, if you would ask me like the day we made the argument, I would have been like,
somebody who has no idea what any of this stuff are thinks this is a politics episode. Yeah. We're talking about reactionary movements trying to revert and like fundamentalist belief structures. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Keep going.
No, you're absolutely right. Because I was just about to make a joke that, fudging anybody's roll is absolutely haram, right? Like, yeah. Whereas, there are, like, I would probably still like frown at fudging a roll, but like when the thing I think I was missing at the time, and I think the thing that I'm more amenable to is like working, I feel like it's like a Matrix line, when you won't have to, right? Like, if you do it right, you won't have to fudge the roll, right? Like, it'll just like you'll have arranged things such that not necessarily that you get the outcome that you need, because, the game varies by its nature, but, that you won't be in a position where you feel like you have to fudge the roll in order to have the campaign continue, which is part of the problem.
The real operative thing that I have changed in my thinking is about the nature of the term play. If you had asked me 8 years ago, I would have said that players are the ones who are playing the game and the DM is not. Now I think the opposite is true, essentially. I used to kind of think that you had DM rules players, but now I think both DM and players are kind of underneath a subset of rules. Or to put this in more straightforward terms, the DM is playing the game alongside the players. They are also playing the game, right? And in order to understand, kind of like that term and that kind of like understanding of sort of how the game works, it requires this level of sort of humility where you as a dungeon master sort of allow yourself to give up certain aspects of control that I was very loath to give up back then, that create, you know, sort of narrative or whatever sort of implications, right? Heretic Heroes was a extremely narrative driven game, but it was one that required players' action. It was one where like the mystery was there. It had been set up. It existed, but the players needed to uncover it piece by piece. Whereas previous games that I run, honestly, Hell's Rebels is really kind of where I actioned a lot of this change. The early days of Hell's Rebels maybe would be like the best kind of counterpoint. That was a very set narrative. I knew what was going to happen after every single, you know, sort of session or whatever. And so in a weird way, it was sort of like players didn't get to like make real choices and decisions. That was something that erupted out of that game in the second, third, and fourth books, right? Where big momentous changes kind of got to be implemented by players to kind of tremendous success. And that's really like the bedrock of kind of my philosophy sort of at this point. And my problem with OSR stuff, at least, you know, as I've read a little bit of it out there and with this stuff with Jeffro Johnson, I don't even really think he understands the game or any of, like, I don't actually think he's thinking about the game that sophisticates, like in that sophisticated a way. So he is highlighting similar sort of problems that I would, right? Which is, you know, that there is a kind of narrative focused sort of play that isn't great, that is very sort of railroady, and where a DM is kind of just like sitting and monologuing at you for large stretches of time. I just think all of that stuff is really bad. But a version of things that includes just play like Gary Gygax in 1978, I think is kind of fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I think he touches on some truths, but I also think, like, you know, he wants to solve the problems with like specific mechanical mechanical prescriptions from that old time, right? Like this whole Jeffroxian time thing, which, you know,
yeah.
Basically, I think he's trying to just like do two things. If I'm being charitable, like and maximally charitable, I think he's trying to do two things at once, which is one, pitch his timekeeping system, which he likes a lot, and two, also pitch kind of, or like talk about the problems he sees, and he's just trying to be like, and you can solve it with, you know, are you tired of spilling your spaghetti in the sink? Use my new colander, right? Like, you know, whereas, you know, like maybe there is a problem with spilling spaghetti in the sink, but you don't need to use his colander to do it, type of deal.
Yeah. Yep, I think that's very true. Do you want to let's define Jeffroxian time? Is there like a good definition online somewhere?
I took it. Like, I'm just remembering what I read from this book, and it seems to me what it is essentially time passes in real time, right? Like outside of the game table. And I think wrapped up in this is also the idea that you're not just running one adventure with one set of characters, right? Like, just to kind of like at a very high level, it seems to me that Jeffro Johnson's ideal D&D campaign is one guy runs a game every week. Whoever shows up. They, you know, and they continue an adventure that they can with that set of people, and that's not necessarily the only party that they're running. And if next week, you know, another set of people, or like, you know, overlapping set of people show up, and you can't want to continue that adventure, you do a different adventure, or start yet another adventure. And so, like, you know, Bob and Steve, you know, who were hurt last week, they are just resting for, you know, 14 days until you play them again, right? Because 14 days have passed in real time, and you just kind of let them do their thing in the background. And this also mandates that your session ends at points where characters can just spend 14 days doing nothing, right? Because time has to pass in real time.
Yeah, I just truly cannot express how ridiculous I find this, to be honest. I don't understand how this does not collide with reality to create the most fucking ridiculous state of affairs. Just to put this in perspective, okay? Right now, our D&D game, 5 people, okay? It is Mago, Rachel, JM, Lokix, and Josh, okay? That means that, and we have 2 rules, right? One is if somebody's out for the week, we will still keep going. If 2 people are out, we will cancel, right? That means that you could have 5 different individual campaigns and characters that you're tracking based on which of those 5 people are out. 6, actually, because then there would also be the representation where all 6 people are sort of in attendance. And you have to reflexively choose or sort of sculpt a set of circumstances around that happening. I have no idea how this is not the most unwieldy thing I have ever heard in my entire life. I just I cannot comprehend the storytelling kind of capabilities that go into something like this. And this is from, I don't think Saran is the most complex, but it is a singular world where multiple stories are being run in parallel, all at sort of the same time, right? I just kind of can't see it. It really makes truly zero sense to me.
So I'm going to try and steel man his position here. I think part of what he wants to do is push players to be doing more coming up with more things on their own rather than kind of taking, following the hook, right? Have them kind of figure out something greenfield. I think part of this too is also the idea that there is I do think this is an OSR thing where modern D&D is a lot more about resource management, right? Like the game assumes that you can beat any single encounter that you're going to run into, and it's about managing your resources such that you can get through the number that you have to in the day. And the penalties are, around either you bite off more than you can chew, or by having to retreat early, there's some consequence generated downstream of that, right? Whereas older games, I think, had less individual encounters encounters were more deadly, and there was less of this kind of you do more than one thing in a day. I think this is part of the whole Jeffroxian time thing, which is time scale should be larger. It is not unreasonable for a team to delve into the dungeon for a day, get their asses kind of kicked, back out, and just spend a week camping, and then go back in again, right? That's that is not, in the world of these games, that is not an unreasonable thing to do. And I bet you we could come up with an interesting way to track, or an interesting thought on tracking the old version of this to kind of the complaints about the modern, 15-minute adventuring day thing, which is fundamentally a problem with this thing I'm talking about how modern D&D is about resource management rather than about difficulty of individual encounters. And so all of this is to say that my bet is that if you said Jeffro Johnson, how do you deal with this problem? It's one, it's probably not 6 games. It's probably 2 or 3, and you just apply those rules as normal, right? Basically, if we were doing it the way that I think that with the way you're running Saran is we would play Rats in the Walls this week, and then next week, while everybody's, Dick is just scrolling through combinations on the lock all week, right? Over 7 days, right? While that's happening, then we switch over to say was it Heathens in the Highlands or whatever it's called?
Liberation in the Heathlands.
Yeah, Liberation's in the Heathlands, right? We scoop back over to those characters, and they're doing their thing. And then on the 3rd week, we go back. Dick has unlocked the briefcase, and we continue on that case, right?
I actually think I do believe that if Jeffro Johnson were in the podcast right now, that's probably what he would say to us. But I actually think that he would misunderstand, and it sounds like to me the games that he is running and that the OSR crowd run in general just can't be as narratively complex as the ones that, like, the part of what makes Heretic Heroes good, or what made Heretic Heroes work, right, was the fact that there was all of this lore. You know, there were lots and lots of clues that had to kind of get put together, right? Something that Freddie the Castellarian recommended. He was like, I think we ought to go, because we were, you know, we were canceling sessions all the time or whatever. He was like, we just ought to go every other week, right? We say, we're on this week, we're off next week, we're on this week, we're off next week, right? And I told him, I was like, I just kind of feel like I can't do that, because part of what makes the game important is remembering and understanding those details. The funny thing, you mentioned the lock, and I had remembered the lock on the trunk, but I was like, oh my God, what was in that trunk? And I had to think about it for a second to go, right, yes, I remember. It's a blank, right? And like, though that memory sort of like testing in these narrative games is just like so much more complex than what it sounds like kind of anything these very dungeon crawly games can even come close to sort of simulating, right? Because it is about, you know, solving a mystery. There are different factions, there are different people with motivations, right? You know, you're trying to remember certain clues because at a certain point in this mystery, I'm going to go, aha, and do you remember when this thing happened, right? And you have to kind of remember sort of those details. And this, in my mind, is the central sort of failing, right? So I would definitely agree with sort of the underlying kind of complaint that a sort of gameless, sacred contractless D&D is bad, and it is a thing that has grown over the 50 years of D&D's sort of lifespan, right? But at the same time, and I would even say kind of more importantly, D&D has also expanded its narrative capabilities. It's not just that, you know, people wanted to be frou-frou storytellers or whatever. It's that they wanted to tell more complex stories, and you need a system that is different than what the OSR crowd has in order to kind of like accomplish that. This is my like central thesis around this whole thing. Like, yeah, I totally get it, but also like
you've frozen on my end. Let's see if this is
a reactionary sort of
my fault, or if
throws
giving us
all of the
again.
innovations that happened. Oh, I'm sorry. Did we lose connection for a minute?
I lost you for about 15 seconds there.
Okay. I was essentially making the case that, you know, this reactionary understanding of the game is throwing the kind of narrative baby out with the bathwater, right? That it is not that, you know, it isn't that D&D is degenerated, it's that it's evolved, and it needed to kind of build up different sorts of muscles in order to support the more complex narrative side of the game. I would actually say that most adventure paths that we see coming out of something like Pathfinder, which is something that is so narratively simplistic that you and I both said on this podcast, I'm really not that interested in playing too many more adventure paths. I kind of wanted to not do that, right? I think those are kind of vastly superior to the capabilities, you know, that were present in essentially kind of the 1980s. That said, I do want to agree with one thing, which is player autonomy. The sort of focus on player autonomy and players creating their own stories, I actually do think is quite good. And I would say is kind of the big overlap between sort of my position and where I would imagine the OSR position. Anyway, I'm sorry, I was about to.
That makes perfect sense. And I think I disagree with you about the OSR thing versus adventure paths. I just don't have a high opinion of adventure paths at this point. I think because, like, in order to have a good, satisfying experience with it, is you have to be able to put the amount of work that say you put into Hell's Rebels, right? Which, you know, you're just not going to get out of your average GM, right? There's going to...
That's fair. I would also say that, like, I think if anybody had played in Hell's Rebels and then went and read the book, right, they would have seen something completely different. To be fair, I haven't played an adventure path since Iron Gods, but even Iron Gods was doing stuff like plot twists and stuff like that. I don't know. But I think that's fair.
It's all plot twists on the rails, though, right? Like, you know...
Yeah, exactly.
And... I do think there's an appeal to this, to the aspect of OSR that is like, you know, you want the players to be invested in paying attention enough that they're kind of coming up with their own pieces of the puzzle. I think this kind of wraps into a thing we've talked about before, where with that might be kind of like a problem with Pathfinder in that, like, you know, if you have a system that can handle so many things, you doing things outside of the system is kind of like naturally shorn off, right? Like this is the clearest example I can think of this is that, like, for a long time, and I think it was 1E, we wanted to do something like a shared signaling language between the members of the party. And for a while, for one of our games, the way we did this is we all spent like, a language point, right? Because you get so many most languages. Like, we're going to set this aside for a shared signaling language between the party. And he was like, great, that sounds fantastic. And then, like, I want to say like a year later, a book comes out with a feat that's like, everybody who has this feat has a shared signaling language, right? And so it's one of those things where, like, if there's a mechanic to handle it, then it kind of like eliminates it from the kind of creative space. And in a game with a ton of mechanics to handle a ton of things, you kind of like naturally squeeze out the kind of creative. You kind of box in the creative space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I absolutely would agree with sort of that understanding of things for sure.
Yeah, and basically the OSR stuff tends to be a little bit more rules light and kind of like, you could do a thing, ask your DM, right? Like, which is, I think, it's one of those things where, like, it's not strictly necessary, right? Like, there's no reason you couldn't do anything in Pathfinder 1E that you could do in an OSR game. But the way the mechanics exist suggests certain, shape the way the players play in a way that I think is directionally correct, but I think the way he wants to that Mr. Johnson here wants to prescriptively solve it is it's kind of like this annoying kind of like, it's annoying because he's very assertive about the way to solve it, and I'm like, that doesn't have to be the way you solve this problem.
Yeah, and I also just kind of don't even think that the real part of this that I think is tough is how much essentially of my games would just be impossible to run on this. There's just no version of like the Braunstein timescale that would work for a campaign pitch that I had, which is the sinking of Seafoam Spire, right? That is a campaign pitch where all of the players get a prophetic dream, and the arc lasts 24 hours as they need to figure out how to stop the spire from sinking into the sea as they saw in their dream, Final Destination style, or else, right? And the fact that it's 24 hours is built into, the understanding of the campaign. It is, you have to be really, really specific sort of like with your time, but it's still built to go out to 6 sessions that, it's funny because the nature of combat is so harsh in time scale. If I imagine 6 3-hour sessions is enough to play the Sinking of Seafoam Spire all the way out, you're actually getting pretty close to 1-to-1 time there. But actually quite a lot of that time is going to be spending an hour and a half running a combat that in game lasts 30 seconds, right?
Right.
And so it's like, it's stuff like that timey-wiminess of it is just kind of like too complex, I think. And I also just think that it removes any kind of like simple flexibility towards the logistics of the game that are like fundamentally necessary. Like, my answer for this kind of is and always has been that when a player has to sit out, their character is there. They make no impactful contributions. They are there for the fights. They miss all of their attacks and they never take any, and the enemies never attack them. Like, it's just like, you don't have to narratively explain it. They are just fundamentally inconsequential for the duration of that game. And when the next chapter, begins, the next session, they have shown up again. Now all of a sudden they were quiet and they have a voice, right? It's the simplest solution I feel like that is sort of possible. But you watch people like Jeffro essentially here create an overbearing system that overthinks that problem to a level that it now precludes all of these other things that you could do sort of interestingly in a narrative or sort of logistical way, right? While at the same time, I'm not even really sure how much I feel like it attacks or solves the core problems that, and like I said, I am also seeing kind of in the way that people play role-playing games.
Yeah. No, that makes sense to me. So where do we want to go with this from here?
Do you want to talk a little bit? I feel like I've alluded a little bit to these problems, but I want to give them their due because I do think that you're right. This is a you thing that we have talked about off the cast about the nature of the game as performance, which is kind of corrosive.
Yeah, so I'm cribbing some of this as is common from an angry GM. I feel like it was like one of his mostly monthly live chats, and he would stress, and I think I will stress too, is that this is not necessarily wrong. It's just kind of like a different way to play the game that's going to shape the way the game is developed and played moving forward, which is with the rise of, popular actual play streams, chief among them being Critical Role. There's this mode of play that has evolved that is different than kind of what we had classically talked about, which is, some, dungeon crawlers versus kind of like theater kids, which is funny because this is not exactly the classic theater kid play pattern, but it is called, or I am calling it, play as performance, which is that the point of playing the game is not to actually engage with the underlying systems or do any of that. It's just kind of like window dressing or maybe a little bit of like narrative, like pushing, which is the point of playing the game is to put on a performance as the character where your rewards are kind of like acting out dramatic scenes and getting to kind of, make it, make it be your, make it like your favorite web series, right? Like your favorite manga, right? Like, where you get to like be the character in those things rather than actually engaging with the game as like an objective thing where, because the purpose is just to act out the storyline, you can trust the storyline's going to resolve in the way that you kind of expect it to based on the plot beats and the tropes, and you're just kind of playing the characters along the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in a certain sense, the actual play stuff I almost sort of think is like a red herring in a way, because I do think that that's like real, but I actually sort of have kind of I like more respect, I guess, for sort of actual play as the format. In my mind, I actually think that actual plays themselves are better at this than sort of bad fans of them are. And I feel like the way that I would explain this is kind of like with an example, right? It is the kind of person who doesn't quite understand there is a level of sort of decision making and autonomy that goes into actual play performances, right? And I think that person walks away with a very sort of unsophisticated misunderstanding of what D&D sort of ought to be. It kind of makes D&D this thing where the teacher calls on you and you go up to the board and you answer the math question sort of type of play. But I actually think that real actual play podcasts and all the rest of that are actually better at this than that sort of suggests. It's this derivation that people get by learning the game through actual play podcasts, where they don't quite understand the ways in which the people on those podcasts are making kind of active decisions to move the, kind of like move the story forward. And that's where you sort of end up with the bad improv kind of, the dice are just there to create prompts for people to sort of react to, and then otherwise the story progresses without any other influence. Yeah, so
I think you're 75% right. I do think there's definitely an aspect of like, these are, professional actors, and they're going to be able to do this better than you can. And so they can act under this thing. But I also do think that there is an aspect of players, or in a actual play, there is incentive to make choices that go against the nature of playing the game for the purposes of telling a compelling story to the audience. This is like the 25% where I'm going to disagree with you, is that I do think there is an aspect of that. And I think good actual plays are good at kind of masking that or hiding that, right? And making it feel a lot more true in a way that at a table, at a player's table, are going to be a lot more ham-fisted and a lot less good. So I think it's a derivation of the thing you said. I also think that there are a lot of actual plays that are also bad, right? Like
I'm sure that's true. Really, what I mean to say is that I actually think that it's about the nature of autonomy, right? The thing that I disagree with this kind of player's performance is these players surrender or don't quite understand the nature of play in relation to the game itself, right? When I think of myself as a theater kid, I think of myself as a narrative player, right? But I want to protect player autonomy, and I want players to make interesting, compelling choices basically at all times, right? The players are the ones who are making the choices alongside the characters for the sake of kind of being the protagonists of their own story. I think all of those two things as deeply kind of interlinked. And I will, I will agree that these are improvisational actors who are better at this than just any of us are ever going to be. And so like, there's like sort of that whole sort of side of it. But I actually do think that they exert a lot of autonomy over the nature of the story, right? Which is to say that they are making decisions in that improvisational way. Some of it that is kind of towards ease of access or whatever, but some of it that does, kind of authentically shape the story that they are all playing in. And that's clever and compelling. I actually think this is kind of the secret sauce and probably the thing that makes, certain actual plays better than kind of like other ones. The thing that I feel like I'm watching happening when I see players' performance kind of go off the rails is where you have someone who is surrendering that autonomy. They're waiting for teacher to call them up to the board so that they can present as their character for six seconds. They're not actually making kind of clever or, impactful sort of decisions. They're sort of waiting to be prompted, right? By, in this case, the dungeon master, who is shepherding them through sort of the story beats because nobody's actually making any real decisions here. We're all just waiting for our turn to read from the script, essentially, right? That's essentially kind of the difference, I would say, sort of between the two.
I'm 100% with you. Like I said, the only part I'm going to vaguely disagree with you is I think that happens a little bit more than you're willing to give in the actual play podcast, but that's
fair.
Neither here nor there, right? Like, that's not actually important for actually playing of the game. That's just kind of a matter
honestly,
of
I haven't even watched or listened to any of these. I have interacted with lots of people who have, so I have seen the bad this kind of person in action a whole lot, but I have actually not spent all that much time with the actual plays themselves, so I won't even report on
interesting.
That side of things.
I'd assume you were a Dimension 20 person, but that.
I mean, I've listened to a campaign on Dimension 20 and some smatterings of sort of other ones, right? But like, I don't think that qualifies me enough to make the judgment call.
Fair enough. I used to listen to there was a Star Wars Fantasy Flight podcast that went on for a very long time. I can't even remember the name of now, but I listened to that for years. And then I actually played Star Wars Fantasy Flight at Gen Con. It was nothing like the podcast was like, oh. Yeah.
But I think, anyway, that these OSR guys are looking at that same problem, and they are sort of solving it, they are sort of solving it this way, which is... I guess they're right. They're allowed to be wrong. And I actually think of them as doing something that is quite similar to the Captain Crunches. In a lot of ways, I actually have a lot of respect for Captain Crunches, even though I'm not one. I don't want to do like a hardcore dungeon crawler kind of game. That's just like not my, well, maybe it is my MO a little more now that I think about it. Okay. I really got into the grind maze. I do have respect for somebody who just wants to master the system and do tough dungeons and boss fights and kind of all of the rest of that. I actually kind of think that, at this point in my career, I sort of think you can just have it all. I think it's a why not both world, right? You can satisfy Captain Crunches and theater kids. You don't have to sort of like pick and choose. Just be good at all of it is sort of my, kind of current thinking and how I want to approach things.
The only thing I will say to that is like I think you can run a game that all those types of people will enjoy, but I think you can't run a game that is going to make all those people maximally happy, because there's going to come a point where you are, talking to the king about, his favorite color pants and how you can get his favor, where the dungeon crawler will be like, I would like to be fighting another monster, please. Right. Like,
yeah.
And so, you can definitely you can definitely. I think you're right. You can definitely make a game that is satisfactory for all those players, but you're never going to make a game that's going to make the theater kid just as happy as the Captain Crunch. When the Captain Crunch could be just dungeon, just be grind mazing the entire campaign, right? Like a classic kind of like there's a dungeon beneath this town. Get to the bottom, go right, like type of deal.
Yeah, I actually think that you can do. Yeah, I don't know. I put a grind maze in the most recent set of Saran pitches which is actually less of a grind maze. It's more based on actually arc rate. It's an extraction shooter. It's Kraj Nine Peaks, which is like, there's this great gigantic underground city that is at war between Dark Elves, Skaven, and the Empire. And so you can venture out into the abandoned city to try and find ancient magical stuff. It is up to you to decide on how long you want to stay out there and when you want to extract and try and bring that stuff kind of home. But that's a game that I would expect Captain Crunches to sort of love. Yeah, this is really a complicated. Delph in the chat says, I can't believe you didn't invite me on this cast as a person who knows the actual Play podcast, and then also says you can never grind maze as hard as me. I say crying as a theater kid.
Yeah.
What I don't know. What else do you want to say about this player's performance stuff?
I don't know if there's a lot else to say.
Just that it annoys you.
Well, it doesn't annoy me so much as I am vaguely worried that it's going to be dominant enough that D&D 6th edition is going to be much more performances play oriented than the previous editions. And we'll see. And, maybe that's the way things end up going. But also, they are not going to burn my copies of D&D 5e or PF2e, right? And my guess is that Paizo is going to continue to appeal to the build crafters more than the PF3, whenever it comes out, is going to appeal more to the build crafters than to the other.
How long was it between PF1e and PF2e? We should know this because we were there. Maybe it's been, was it 10 years maybe? 2023 to 20? No, it's got to be longer than that. It was 20, maybe it was 15 years.
Yeah. Pathfinder role playing. Let's see.
Because I want to say the first edition was in like the 2000s. Like 2008 or something like that. Maybe it was 2008 to 2018. I vaguely remembered it being 10 years.
I'm looking. It's 2008 for Pathfinder, and then 2018 is when they announced second edition. It looks like it was like around 2019, so 11 years.
Okay.
And then we got a remaster in like 2023 of Pathfinder with the kind of the ogre the orc license, like the whole blow up with wizards trying to undo the open sourcing of their license, blah blah blah. So I guess we should expect to see a third edition in like 2030, which is closer than I want to admit.
Yeah, we are closer to third edition than the onset of second edition. We've just started playing it.
Yeah, assuming that, third edition comes out at the 11-year mark. But, we also don't have to stop playing second edition. I've been playing second edition since the beginning.
That's true. It's funny. Warhammer has editions, and their editions are 3 years. Like we're in Warhammer 10th edition, but everybody's talking right now about 11th edition is going to come in probably June of this year. But they have their editions are like soft and hard reboots where, sometimes their editions are backwards compatible with old codexes, and sometimes they were forwards compatible, which is to say that all of the old codexes get like deprecated or whatever. And I was just sort of like, Christ, can you imagine a version of Pathfinder where there's a new edition of the base game every 3 years?
Yeah, no, I would not want that. That sounds... But it's not like the...
Maybe... I actually kind of would be maybe interested in it in a way where it's more framed around kind of like seasonal content or play. Like you could imagine a version of things where they sort of say the base classes for this are going to be the Blood Rager, the Hunter, the, you know, whatever. And they like, instead of doing the typical 12 that we've been doing for the last 20 years, right? It's like, actually our base classes are going to be Artificer, Alchemist, Gunslinger, you know, and it's like a bunch of stuff. And it encourages people to just roll completely different shit than they have been, you know, that they have been playing and start a new campaign or whatever. And then the expectation would be that campaign would run for a couple of years. And then at about the time that it, I don't know, finishes, it gets to its apex, you would then start a new game with the next edition. I actually think business-wise, you could probably make something like that work in the RPG space.
Yeah, but I feel like you'd want to do that with... I feel like you want to do that less with base rules and more with kind of like published campaigns, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the fundamental problem. It's like you never want to, you know, be like, I would like to sit down to play my fantasy TTRPG and be like, and say like, you cannot play a wizard, right? If you would like to play a wizard. You just want it to be like, this campaign would be pretty swell if you played a Blood Rager, and be like, okay, I'll do that. But if someone's like, no, I would like to play a normal wizard, and be like, you will have a good but not optimal time if you are not playing one of the 3 favorite classes. Like, that's fine, right?
Yeah, I would be interested in a world where that stuff, like you could, like wizards are in 3rd edition D&D, they are just the supplemental class rather than the base class, right?
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like the structure of a fantasy TTRPG that doesn't quite lend itself as well. That kind of, I understand what you're saying, but I also feel like it just kind of, I just feel like it doesn't quite work wouldn't quite work out that way in terms of like an actual, you know, this edition is just Blood Ragers and you know, and War Priests, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it would be 12 of them. You know, you'd have your same sort of classes, but instead of having, instead of having clerics, you'd have War Priests. And so you have the particularly more martial bent. And instead of having druids, you would have, I don't know, what's the fucking like caster?
Shapeshifters.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that, right? Where it's kind of like, okay, you can still hit on most of the important stuff, right? So you get all the classics. You have a full caster who's going to be blasting stuff, but maybe it's not sorcerer. Maybe it's warlock or witch or whatever, right? You know, something kind of along those lines. I actually think that would be sweet. I think that would be awesome. But I also kind of think that like classes and stuff like that are underutilized typically. I guess I would say Pat Paizo does a good job of making them. They make a lot, more than 5e does, right? But you could also do this with like subclasses and stuff like that. You could have fighter, but instead of having, you know, like the champion, I don't remember what they're called. You know, the rogues have their racket or whatever. Instead of having a thief racket, you have an assassin racket. Instead of having a whatever, you have a poisoner racket or something kind of along those lines to like shake up the underlying mechanical subtext of it. Because really this is in service to, I think people get burned out on mechanics over time.
I actually think that that's maybe a better way to do this. Is like, you know, this is the 2026 remaster of Pathfinder. These are the core rackets, and it's things that are different. It's still like a rogue. You can still play a rogue, but like, you know, playing normal rogue, which I think thief is the racket there, is just like less supported. And like, you know, if you really want to, you can go pull it from the 2021 edition. But the core thing you should be focusing on is poisoner, assassin, and like demolitionist or something, right? Like 3 very new takes.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And you know what you would do? You would tie it into a narrative thing. You would say the 3rd edition or whatever, the 2026 remaster is focused on this piece of the world map where rogues here are just less thieves and whatever, they are just more poisoners and assassins, right? And then you can kind of put a little magnifying glass on stuff like that, and you build it all into the lore of whatever. I mean, I don't know. Galarian lore is already pretty complex and complicated, so maybe it would be harder to execute on that than I think, but I think that would be sweet. Okay.
Yeah. There is like the thing that immediately popped into my mind is like, we're going to focus on Alkenstar, and all the rogues are like, you know, sneaky thieves, and we're playing, you know, Outlaws of Alkenstar Junction, the RPG, right? Like, just put a cowboy hat on everything, right? Like,
yeah, that's kind of it. And I think because you could do that, you could do you could do the land of the Linorm Kings or whatever. You could do, I don't know, you could do a bunch of different stuff with that kind of stuff. But
basically, we should do, the Pathfinder, you should do magic sets, right? Like we're visiting,
shit. Is that what I'm pitching? Fuck, I think I am.
Don't worry.
Listen, they have their, shitty card game, Pathfinder Adventure Battle or whatever.
In 2032, we can, play Pathfinder Marvel superheroes, where everybody can be Spider-Man.
Fucking kill me. I can't wait for there to be a line in my rules text that says the ring tempts me. Like, whenever you roll initiative, the ring tempts you. Okay.
The ring tempts my pizza lands. Go.
Honestly, they did Universes Beyond for D&D before they ever did it for Magic, because they brought Magic things into D&D, and they had because I think Ravnica was the first one. They made an adventure or campaign setting for Ravnica.
Yeah.
Which is a little universes within. I mean, it's all Hasbro, obviously, but I think it is the clear kind of pattern that they were going off of.
Universes next door.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely was a test
anyway,
bed.
the last thing I want to ask about OSR stuff, was there anything that you found compelling in here that you're like, you know what, we ought to do this in our games?
So there was a bit about following the rules, right? Which was always like, yes, and I agree with this.
Did you love Gary Gygax making the same point that you have made to friends of ours in a letter in 1980 in Dragon magazine to some guy named Norm from fucking Idaho or whatever? I read that section and I was just like, oh my God.
But so there was nothing in here. There's nothing in here that I thought was mind blowing. There is this bit about I think the attitude of being a little bit more open and trying to make things a little bit less. So there's two things at tension here before I get ahead of myself.
Okay.
There's this thing that your GM talks about, which I think is mostly correct, which is put the challenge in front of your players. Give them several obvious choices, and they will probably pick one of those. But if they decide to do something totally off the wall, let them do that anyway. But 9 times out of 10, they're going to follow one of the kind of a smart option, kind of one of the options that is that makes sense, right? It's you need to get into the town, right? You can either bribe convince the guard to let you in, climb over the wall, or sneak in through or there's a caravan parked that you passed that's going to come in, and you can convince them to hide the thing. These are the obvious paths. And then maybe the dwarf says, we're going to tunnel in, right? It's okay, we'll let you do that, right? Even though that's probably not, that's the creative option. But 9 times out of 10, the players are going to try and bribe the guard and then figure something else out if that doesn't work. And I think that's in tension with what I think Jeffro would ideally have you do is be there's a town. What do you want to do? And leave it there, right? And there's a big wall, and basically, I think Jeffro wants you to let the players kind of fill in texture themselves and try and figure out all of those things yourself. And I don't think that's optimal, but I do think there is a tendency in the opposite direction, which is kind of and the GM says, and there's a wall in front of you, and the guard calls out to you and says, I would like to be bribed, right? And just kind of forces you down that path. And so
yeah, I absolutely
or language in the grind maze for 800 years.
Because one of the things that I was thinking about when I was reading Jeffro's thing was about how little it seemed he was thinking or encouraging people to think about the construction of their world. When I created Rats in the Walls, I know what the conspiracy is. I understand who Sister Lucilla was. I understand why she was murdered. I understand how she was murdered and why certain things in her murder happened in the ways that they did. And I explained all of that clearly to you guys. I don't know how you're going to get to the other end of that. Like, the goal is that you are going to unravel the conspiracy about what's going on in this city, why this murder happened right in front of your eyes in the way that it did, right? You are going to be able to find sort of those answers. But all I really did, I feel like, was create like a thing that happens, and how you come to understand that is really kind of up to you. And that does leave a little bit of room for improv, as Miss Periwinkle Snozbottom sort of suggested, right? I wasn't really thinking about like what would other neighbors. I knew she had an apartment, and I knew it was in her apartment, but I didn't know what her neighbors thought about her. And so here was a moment where I had done prep work, and I went, oh, she has an apartment. In the apartment, she has a chest, and also she had that thing in her pocket. Like, all of that was all staged, obviously. But when you go and start canvassing people and going, what did other people, what did her neighbors think of her? Did they notice anything? Oh, well, now I have to think on my feet and come to those sorts of answers to kind of rise to the occasion of the player's ingenuity, right? And it feels like that's kind of the piece that I just think is missing in the way that it seems like, I don't know. I maybe used to think that you could just kind of improv everything and it would be fine, but I am no longer a believer in that. I think you have to have concrete answers to some of these things, but you just have to not create the railroads that connect your plot points. Basically, you just kind of have to let people figure that stuff out on their own. Yeah, no, I am like 85% on board with all of that. I think probably more close to even closer. I'm probably like 98% on board with all of that. And I think the thing that Jeffro wants that I think is misguided is I think what he wants is like, I talk about like how natural strategy decision-making games at Gen Con, I think he wants players to do that just kind of on their own accord. And it's kind of hard to make people do that. And he thinks that like, doing Jeffroxy in time will make that happen somehow. I guess. When I think part of it, I think part of what happens with these types of books is like, you play enough that like you have a group that you are both comfortable enough with, and that are like you have a great time playing with them, and you try and think about like, why is my game with this group of friends so good, whereas like the game that I play at the con with randos bad, and you're like, well, it can't be that it's my friends are cool and the randos at the con don't know each other very well. It's because they aren't using my time system, right? Like, yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's ultimately where the stuff was. But, as a matter of experimentation, I would be interested in trying to do like a Jeffroxian time thing just to see how it went. And so I was talking to a buddy about this before the cast, but I won't be doing Jeffroxian time, but I am playing in an OSR game that we actually just had our first session today. It's a system called Hyperborea. And the GM was like, it is a deadly game, right? Like, you should not play this like PF2E. After we just TPK'd in PF2E, so you can tell how we're doing.
So what's happening there? Are you guys just done?
Yeah, the kid. We were apparently like a session or two away from ending that campaign anyway. It wasn't a long one. It was like a 3-month one at best. It was like, so it's like, yeah, we die. I guess the cult wins, right? Like,
it's funny. I have thought to myself, and basically all of my Sauron games have some version of this, of like the players can fail and a thing can go, can go wrong. The best version of this is in 7th Expedition. There was a timer on a dungeon that they whiffed, basically, and the Tomb King in the dungeon sent out a big beam that woke up all of the other Tomb Kings and complexes all across the continent, right? Which was, they didn't quite understand where the timer was at, but they were very methodical and cautious, and they slept a little bit too much, and that meant that they were in a position to defeat the bad guy, which they did, but also that he did this thing which is like bad in other kind of contexts. So I definitely think that like having situations where you allow the cultists to win is sort of good, but a TPK and you just end the game is rough, buddy. Like, fuck, man.
I think that if we really cared enough, he would have like, figured it, we would have, but it's just like a 1 to 4 level adventure that was going to end soon anyway, right? Like, this is where Elias Tidewell comes from, actually. And I just don't think another, like, it was kind of like, I guess we lost this one, right? Like, in the previous game with that group, which was the first full adventure pass, and it took us like 4 years to get through, there was a point at which we should have TPK'd and we all kind of got like captured and escaped from prison, right? So it's not like the GM's against that kind of thing, but just kind of like, well,
Fair
that's where we are, right? And so,
I think about having different endings. Heretic Heroes had we've talked about this a couple of times on the cast because there was the Skittergate. You could have gotten out by teleporting into Skavenland, which would have been awesome. There was the one where you fight and kill the warden of the prison. You essentially treat the prison as the final dungeon. You kill the warden and then you escape from there. And then there was one where you go to the prison that got fucked up. Which was just all about fighting tons and tons of ghosts and revenants and stuff like that. And you could then escape through that, like that sort of, but each of those, I kind of wanted there to be real closure, even if you don't solve the beacon, for instance. You guys never solved the warden, right? The warden was cracking down on the prison. You had a bunch of friends in the prison and you just sort of left them behind. And like, I just think stuff like that is inevitable. You have to sort of like live with it, right? But every ending to an arc should probably have some sort of closure. But hey, I guess TPK is a closure sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, this is also part of why I don't like Adventure Pass so much. Is like by the end of it, I don't always care. But to kind of get back to the point, Hyperborea, the GM basically told us like you should have an idea for a second character, in the back of your head because. A death is like we got out of like our second encounter today with 3 people down, right? Like, 3 of the 5 members of the party and, dragged us out.
Down or dead?
Down. Not quite dead yet. Okay. But like, this is old school style negative HP. You know what happens when you have negative HP and you roll a Cure Light Wounds for somebody with like negative 4 HP and you roll like a 5 on it, they have 1 hit point. It fucking sucks, right? So it's like we dragged ourselves out of the cave and just like, rested for like a full day. And then like, we go back, it's like, okay, we go back into the cave and we get basically back to like, the room before we left. It's like, all right, stop. Somebody hears you. And then that's when we ended the session. It's like, okay, this is gonna be a rough one, right? Like,
I do miss negative HP days. One of my favorite like things that you used to have to do all the time was the like dance around somebody going into negative HP. You hit them with a heal, but they're still in melee range of a bad guy. So they just have to lay on the floor for a turn, even though they are fully conscious. Because if they wake up and stand up, they're just going to get AO'd and fall back down again. And like, I actually think that, I don't know. I'm sure when I was in the thick of it, I thought that kind of, jockeying was sort of annoying. But the removal of it is a little less cool.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure I love death saves, but anyway.
Death saves are interesting because I don't know. I think death saves actually has this problem more because at least with negative HP, like, I guess you're right. When you get high enough levels, the ability for someone to take you from like 1 to like negative 15 and you're insta dead is higher. But with death saves, or at least the way the Pathfinder does it, you just have the same problem. Right, like you stand up and then you immediately get knocked down again. Then you're down to like dying 3, and you're gonna die. Right.
Yeah. I kind of wish there was a more I think about wounds and like a wound system. We did a wound system with Mark in college when we did that game in Pathfinder 1E, where when you went down and you hit certain, it was like when you hit less. It was so complicated. I think it was when you went to 0 HP. You like drew from a deck of cards or something that he had. And then it was like, you are wounded and the wound has a thing like -2 strength or something, like 2 strength damage, like that kind of stuff. And you had to like heal that off. So like, even if you go down and came back up, you still kind of carried some of that forward. I don't know how I feel about any of that.
Yeah. I don't either. It kind of like makes balancing. The problem is it's hard to kind of like give someone a meaningful enough penalty that it will hamper them, but not so. But like, if it's bad enough, then the players are just going to do something that doesn't involve risk until they're healed up, right? Like, so it's hard to hit that sweet spot where it's enough to be meaningful, but not so much the player's going to be like, all right, we go back to town and like find a doctor to patch up his arm. And also doing, or because the other way to do this is to like force it so that they have to deal with it, and that feels kind of like a screw job in some ways. So it's tough. It's tough to figure that kind of thing out. Although I do think it's an interesting idea, right?
I actually think the part about it that fails is the number keeping of it. I actually think the idea of it is quite good, but nobody ever wants to track that kind of stuff, and people are very bad about tracking that kind of stuff long term, right? So it just kind of gets edited out because, like, you just have players who are encouraged to forget, shall we say, certain rules and all of that.
Yeah, this is a thing where, like, with the angry GM will tell you is that as the GM, you just need to know all of this, right? Like, which is a tall aspect. It's like, you gave them a broken arm. You need to know that they take -2, and so when they roll it, you need to basically. I feel like the way the angry GM would tell you this is like when they roll their attack, you're telling them whether they hit or not, and that's based on you knowing you knowing their numbers and your numbers.
Yeah, is, like, technically speaking, it is not that the enemy gains 2 AC when fighting this character, but mechanically speaking, that is identical to a player rolling at a -2, and so you probably just like do that math on their behalf.
Yeah, but essentially, I think he would say that you should be doing all of the math on their behalf, right? Like they roll a 17, and you know if that's a hit or not, which is a lot, I think, and I don't know how realistic that is. But.
Yeah, it also does that thing where players can triangulate like AC and stuff like that, which I actually think is good. I used to hate this, but I now think that it is actually good and sort of engaged gameplay where like player A rolls an 18 and hits, player B rolls a 17 and misses. And you go, okay, they have an AC of 17 or 18 or whatever the number is. And you go, okay, great. I actually think that's great. I like that. I think that, that kind of play is good. And so technically speaking, if I was in a situation where I had to then go and explain to a player, oh, well, you actually miss on this 19, even though he just hit on an 18 because you have the -2 from your broken arm, is just like, that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree, but yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
There you go. That's the thoughts. Tell me about your week, I guess.
So what have I done? It's been 2 weeks. On the gaming front, I do want to say, so I think I'm going to, I'm going to try on something new for this year for us. I'm going to give you until 2027 to figure out your answer to this, which is I'm going to award a post-Derpy's Derpy. And I don't want to put you on the spot for the full thing, which is, this is for a 2025 game. It is called Skin Deep. It is an immersive sim where it is published by Annapurna. It is made by Blendo Games, which was funny.
Oh my God, I know Blendo. Yeah.
I would say I started playing it, and then so you play as an insurance commando who it's this weird thing where it's like the 1990s, but like there's space travel, and you are an insurance agent for a corporation that basically sends out commandos to rescue crews from spaceships, but the crews are all cats. And the cats are all these like square, boxy looking things. I'm like, I recognize this art style. This is the same as that fucking weird spy game that I played back in college, which was Gravity Bone by Blendo Games. And it is delightfully charming. It's like a lo-fi Hitman, maybe is the best way to put it. It is great in that like doing combat with the enemies is not super tenable. You have to kind of work around them. But there's a bunch of ways to solve each level. I had a ton of fun with it. I beat it in like 10 hours, but it was a super, super fun experience. I'm going to give it my, I'm going to give it the Derpy for best comedy game of 2025. And I will let you decide if, or maybe indie game, whatever. I'm trying to make this easy for you. That way you don't have to like.
Yeah. Sure.
I'm going to give it best indie game of 2025. You can, if you've got one now, you can answer, or you can come with one in a later week.
I maybe have an answer. Did this come out in 2025? I want to say, shit, this was in 2024.
Have I ever? So Delve the Chances. Have I ever seen a crescent moon? I
this is just stop it.
I
said a thing. I said a thing. I now need to like look this up on the cast. Okay.
I am missing so much. I have in fact seen a crescent moon.
Fuck, god damn it. I have to tell this whole story. The other day I said this to Rachel where I was like, did you know that crescent moons aren't real? Because I think she mentioned something about a moon, and I said that and I just kind of moved on from it. And I remember it as I think it was in physics is where I learned this. We did something in physics where we talked about the nature of how light reflects off of the moon. And so in order to create a crescent moon, you have to block a certain amount of the moon with the Earth. And in order to do that, the light has to triangulate in a way. And I think I don't even remember the specifics of it. The takeaway was that I said a dumb thing about this fucking crescent moon or whatever.
The chat says, Steph says, you did not move on. I went, what? What are you talking about? And you GFC style doubled down and went, show me a crescent moon.
I think it's maybe that like
I could believe a softer version. First of all, the moon is a sphere the whole time. It just looks different, right? Like, but I could believe a version of things where it's like the DreamWorks crescent moon can never form in the way that it forms, right? Like, or something like that.
I figured it out. I Googled it and I found an answer. Okay, 11 years ago on Reddit, somebody said, okay, explain it like I'm 5. Why can we see the crescent phases of the moon at night? Somebody said, so in science class a long time ago, was this fucking me? Okay, in science class a long time ago, I was explaining the phases of the moons by this diagram moving along the lines of this, and it's showing this thing of how like the Earth moving in front of the moon, or is what creates the crescent moon sort of like effect or whatever. And the answer is you can't see a crescent moon all night long. You can only see it for a part of the night around twilight on one side or the other, because you have to have if you just think about it, you have to have the sun a little bit hitting you in order for it also to bounce and hit the moon if you're blocking with the Earth. This is so terrible. This is the worst thing. Why are you bringing this up on the podcast, Rachel? God damn it. You're ruining my podcast with talking about this crescent moon.
Anyway. Skin Deep is a great game. I highly recommend it to everybody out there. It was recommended. I got it off of Adam Millard. He's a YouTuber. He did 25 games or 20 games he didn't play in 2025 or something like that. And it was one of them, and I agree. It is fantastic. What else? I watched all of Pluribus, the new Vince Gilligan show, or at least the first season. Which is have you heard of this at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so I understand it as it has Kim from Better Call Saul in a hive mind, or she's not in the hive mind, but other people are in the hive mind, and she fucks the hive mind. This is what I understood. Those 3 facts are what I got from Twitter.
That last one's kind of spoilersy.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Basically a signal comes from space. It is in RNA encoding. They decode it. It gives everybody kind of like psychic powers and makes them all into a hive mind. And there's 12 or 13 individuals, I can't remember which, who are not part of the hive mind. and it follows one of them who is Rhea Seehorn's character is a romantasy author who is very kind of has no illusions about the literature. She thinks basically that she writes trash for trash people, and it just makes money, right? And so it's very interesting following her. And there's a character reveal, I will say, about halfway through that kind of explains why she's pushing so hard against the hive mind, which I think is good. There's also some like very kind of unsubtle imagery. Like in the second episode, she gets together with these other characters, or at least the English speaking ones. And like everybody else is just kind of like, oh, this is kind of neat, right? Like there's one guy in particular who's like, this is great, right? Like, he's like a hedonist. He just kind of like, sleeps with whoever he wants and like, eats all the greatest food. Because basically the thing here is that, the hive mind is friendly and wants everybody to be friendly. Like if you get mad at it and scream at that, you cause the entire hive mind to freak out. Like Rhea Seehorn doesn't realize it's going to happen and screams at them and like ends up killing like 1 million people or something. And, it causes her incredible mental distress. What was I going to say? So in the second episode, she gets everybody together and she's like, we got to do something about this. And the framing of such is just like her face next to the American flag on like a screen because it's taking place in the Air Force One's like, thank you, Vince Gilligan. I understand what you're doing here, right? Like the American character is like, we need to meddle, right? Like, it is like the least subtle, I always think of the fucking, what is it? Somebody's Dark Place, Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, which is, I know authors who use subtext and they're all cowards. Every time something obvious happens on screen, that's how I feel about it. Which will bring me quickly to the other thing that I have been doing. Speaking of lacking subtext, we watched the first season of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and then we have started watching the third season of Avatar, The Last Airbender, and oh my god, it has never been more Star Wars, right? Like, it's fucking...
Wait, hold on. Have you gotten to Ember Island yet?
Yes. This was one of the Ember Island where, like, they're all, like, sitting on the beach talking about their feelings and how they're fucked up, right? It's just like, Zuko gives his speech, and my wife is, like, tears in her eyes. Is like, this speech always... got to me. I'm sure if I first saw this when I was a teenager, it would have spoken to me as a moody teenager. But as a 35-year-old man watching Zuko just be like, I'm mad at myself. I just inside I'm just like, this is the most Christian thing. But I can't make fun of my wife because it means something to her, right? Like,
I love it. Listen, she's right, okay? And you're wrong, is all I'm going to say, because that moment is really good. And also, I would cry a lot if I was watching it. I bought Zuko. I bought a lot of singles recently. Over the past 2 weekends, I've spent a lot of time just like going looking at singles at card shops. Fun activity. I love this. And I bought Zuko Conflicted, which is a black-red commander that I think I am going to make a whole deck for. And it truly sucks. It is a shitty card that is not good and will not win me games. But because the feelings, okay, I have to make this deck to express my inner 14-year-old, I was older than that when Avatar came out, 16, 17-year-old, when I was mad at my dad, right? Like that kind of thing. Oh, Avatar: The Last Airbender, man.
Yeah, I want to make an Iroh Team Master deck. I think that's the name of the card. The one where you give people
Iroh
stuff.
Team Master is the one where he gives stuff away. It's like Skillskin, but black-red, or white-red, rather, right?
Yeah, it might be mono-red. It's either white-red or mono-red, but it's also like, it can't, I don't want to build it like Stiltskin, like I built Stiltskin, which is just kind of like be annoying. He is white-red. I want to kind of like build it in a way that's like actually based around giving stuff away in like a friendly way. And like playing politics, I guess.
Yeah, seems good. I love that idea. I have decided on the Magic front, even though I got insanely fucking Magic blue balls yesterday because there was a snowstorm and we could not meet up and play a ton of Magic, I have put together a bunch of new decks, which I'm very excited to make a reality. And I played one of them. I played Bumbleflower on Monday when there was no D&D, and oh my god, that deck. Oh, I'm a little bit mad about how much I love it. It's like so perfect. It is the right amount of kind of active that I don't think that it triggers people's like Takasia brain. You know, Takasia was a character, like Takasia is a deck that takes a lot of game actions, does a lot of stuff, but it's pretty incomprehensible what it's doing. And so you just kind of have to like hope that Buddy isn't winning by playing solitaire in his corner of the commander like table or whatever. Bumbleflower is the opposite of that. It's same colors, same kind of thing, lots and lots of game actions, but I'm causing people to draw cards all the time, and I'm putting +1/+1 counters on things, which are just extremely legible mechanics. And so it was people liked that deck way more, which I just thought was, I don't know, interesting, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm interested to see it. Like that like I've been theory crafting decks too, and you know, I'm actually excited for Lorwyn. I want to rip some Lorwyn packs, like legitimately.
I want to do our first. I have not made this pitch yet, but I do want to do our first commander draft with Lorwyn packs. I've actually been thinking about picking up a box for it, and just like trying to like put together a good weekend that we can push Lorwyn, because I think Lorwyn is neat. I think that it has great sort of synergies for this kind of stuff, and it will just be like neat and interesting. Are you doing Alex's pre-release?
I am planning to, if I can find a what's it called?
A kit.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to find a kit. I think I'm just going to buy 7 packs and do we used to do this for pre-releases where you would, if you're doing an at-home pre-release, you buy 7 packs and then you open one kind of in front of everybody and you say, this is my promo rare, because a pre-release pack has 6 or a pre-release kit has 6 packs and a promo rare. And so you just open that 7th pack, you take only the rare out of it, and then you open your other 6 packs as kind of normal. And I think that's how I'm going to handle it. But doing it online is also kind of like wild. I also have lots of thoughts about doing a commander pre-release. I've thought about this, like if we could all get together and do pre-release kind of thing for, like a commander draft kind of format as well. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I think it would be fun for those of us that are local to try and like. It might be weird to try and like get people to like jump into the to figure out how to have multiple people doing spell table at once. But it would be fun to like have us all in the same place running around at the same time. And if we play, if we get rounded against each other, we can play head to head.
Yeah, I was trying to think through this because I wanted to do something like that. Like, you technically have to solve for a situation where everybody could be on a webcam if necessary, like if we all happen to be mixed up. But like, if I'm going to play fucking Savadar or something, I just want to be able to go, hey, let's just go to the kitchen table and do this, right? Yeah. And we just play it out in front of each other or whatever. I've also been doing this thing with Magic that we did very successfully literally last night, which was, do you know what Jumpstart packs are?
I have no, actually. Just tell me.
Yeah, okay. For the purpose of the cast, Jumpstart packs are essentially sort of it's a little booster pack of 20 cards and includes a bunch of basics, right? And the idea is all of the cards in that pack are themed around a certain sort of like idea. And the way that you play a Jumpstart deck is you take 2 of those packs, you shuffle them together, you have a 40 card deck that you can just play on the spot. And it has 2 things, you end up with a 2-color deck. It has 2 relatively, straightforward sort of themes. It has a bunch of rares and stuff like that in there. Rachel and I bought 2 Jumpstart packs each, and we played jumpstart with our jumpstart decks or whatever, and I was just like, this was so much fun. We went out to a restaurant is the thing that happened. We went out to a restaurant and I was like, let's just like crack these packs and play this tiny little shitty game of Magic while we're waiting for our food to get here, kind of thing. And we ended up having so much fun that I bought a whole box of jumpstart packs because they're doing it for Avatar, so they're all Avatar jumpstart packs. But it doesn't matter because jumpstart packs are cheaper than normal packs because they come with a bunch of basics and stuff like that, right? But I just love the idea of picking 2 jumpstart, packs out of the thing, going to Red Arrow Diner, playing on the side, and then ordering a cheeseburger. I have this whole thing actually about I want to play Magic for like hours and hours on end at the Red Arrow Diner. Did you ever have this experience when you were in like high school or whatever, where like you would go and sit in a diner for like 7 hours and just kind of continually order food like you're in a bar or something like that? Do you know, like, this is like a thing that we did in our high school that I have extreme nostalgia for, but I think it might just be me.
we would go to like the Dunkin' or the Dairy Queen and sit there for hours and not order food continuously and piss off people who work there. But it's not like we were taking seats from paying customers, but
yeah, we would go to like a 24-hour diner and we would just like hang out. We played Magic a lot. This was before Commander. But like this was where a lot of the multiplayer Magic happened. We used to play Wheel, which I've talked about on the cast before, where you can only attack the person on your left. So it simplifies attacking quite a bit, but you get into this situation where like somebody gets really far ahead and they're like gunning for you or whatever, and they're just chewing people in front of the wheel up, and you're just like, oh my God, can anyone assemble the defenses or like play we weren't really doing all that much with board wipes or whatever. Honestly, our Magic decks were pretty bad back then, but that was a game that was a game type that we had played that was a ton of fun. And we used to do that just like sitting in a diner for a long time. And I don't think that it's really possible to do that in the modern era of Magic. It's just the game is so much more complicated, but I have a lot of nostalgia for it. And so Jumpstart is kind of getting close to that.
That makes sense.
I've also been thinking about rebuilding my Rexiel deck. I watched a video of the professor in Tolarian Community College. He played a game of like old school Magic where he and a couple of other people, Sam from Ristic Studies and Spice 8 Rack and somebody else, remade their very first Commander decks, and they had a game of Commander, and it's so incredibly nostalgic, this insanely dumb and bad and stupid game of Commander that I was like watching. It was like mono black Vampire Tribal was going so insane, right? Somebody was playing Nim the Pain Artist, which is a truly terrifyingly bad card. Nim the Pain Artist is like a 1/1 for blue and a red, so you're in blue-red, and has an activated ability that is X blue-red, tap it, deal X damage to target creature. Its controller draws that many cards, and so the whole point of the deck is to put Nim out with stuff like Indestructible Mirror, and then you target the Indestructible Mirror for like 5 mana to draw 3 cards. And that's like it. It's so bad. And I have just been thinking about my Rexiel, the Risen Deep, which was my first Commander deck that famously got stolen. And I just want to play that deck again. And it's bad, and it's going to be terrible. It's never going to win a single fucking game, but I just kind of like don't care. That era of Commander was so dumb, and something I was talking to Sarian about is that weirdly, we used to play 13 or 14 turn games of Commander it wasn't even Commander, it was EDH back then. It was even before Commander. That went faster, that ended in about 45 minutes or an hour, just because people were just doing so much less. It was like, I spend 5 mana and draw 3 cards, pass the turn. And that was it. Like, weirdly, we have these decks that win the game on turn 6 and 7, which is half the turn length, but they're probably taking 4 or 5 times as many game actions because we're all playing, really efficient 2 mana flyers that put a bunch of +1/+1 counters, and now I'm swinging them with a 7/8. It's just like all that stuff is so insane these days. But anyway, so I might remake my Rexiel, the Risen Deep deck.
Yeah, no, fair enough. What do I have?
Even though I'm pretty sure if I did, I would make it. It would be the most expensive deck I own because that deck had an insane amount of tech that was just like really, really expensive cards.
Yeah, I mean the secret is proxies, always proxies.
Yeah, that's true.
No, my two new decks that I want to build is one I want to upgrade Gonti, which is its own thing, but I've got a Captain Nagathrod and a what's it called, Maryland Fey Ascendant deck that I want to build.
Oh, I wanted to build Captain Nagathrod, but then Josh kind of took dibs away from me on it, and I said okay. Because he and I were talking about, I love blue-black. I want to make all the blue-black decks. I think my next blue-black deck is going to be John Arenicus. Do you know this deck?
No.
John Arenicus is great. John Arenicus says at the beginning of your end step, you would love this deck, by the way. You can give another creature to another, give a creature you control to an opponent. It gets 2+1/+1 counters. It is just goated forever. It can never stop being goated. And it, whenever it attacks, you draw a card, and there's more. Oh, and it can't be sacrificed. So you play John Arenicus, and then you play these insane, you just play these insane cards that are terrible, but because they're not yours, you give them to somebody else. So an example would be Ebon Blade Reaper, which says, when Ebon Blade Reaper attacks, and it's goated, it has to attack every turn, you lose half your life rounded up. And so, anyway, I saw this because I was watching, just like a Commander video on YouTube. Somebody was playing this. He gifted an Abyssal Persecutor to somebody. Abyssal Persecutor says, you can't win the game and your opponents can't lose the game. And then somebody cloned the Abyssal Persecutor, so there were two of them on the board. And then the question was, what happens? And the answer was, can't always wins, so nobody could lose the game at that moment. And then everybody brought, somebody brought all, with just attacking, everybody's life totals were in the negative. It was -7, -8, -12 or whatever. And then somebody blew up a Nevonero's disc, which killed both creatures, and the whole table just drew because they were all at 0 when both Abyssal Persecutors died, which I was just like, that's amazing. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Amazing. Fantastic. Oh, love that. Absolutely adore that.
The one other thing I did that was interesting, I think, is I played Warhammer 40K with Sarian, not last night, night before for his birthday. We played Crusade. We are going to do just a little 1v1 Crusade called War in the Warp, where my world eaters are facing off against his 1,000 sons. And please don't ever tell Sarian this, but he is going to fucking destroy me over the course of this Crusade because flamers are so insane against my army. Holy fuck. I lost the first game by an extremely narrow margin. Because I disrespected I did not quite understand how insane a full rack of Rubric Marines with flamers were. He basically just one shot my whole group. But we were playing on the Armageddon Crusade book, and the rules, I actually think you would love this if you got into 40K or whatever. The rules are so insane. Armageddon, the idea behind the Armageddon Crusade is that Angron is attacking. It's very World Eaters focused, which is what I wanted to play it. But every mission has these warp anomalies that just fucking spawn, and it just makes the game, it's like playing Warhammer with Ian Malcolm, basically, where it's just on the beginning of the second and third turns, you roll 3d6 and you check it against the warp anomalies table, and the warp anomalies table go insane. What happens? Who knows? It's just crazy bullshit. I was we spawned, there were a bunch of dogs because there's PvE in this as well, where like just random chaos demons will sit on the map and they get their own turn where they go first and they just immediately attack the closest person. And so these dogs attacked me and my berserkers and like killed 5 of them. And it was like, what the fuck? God damn it, these stupid dogs. I had a couple of very neat plays that I was very proud of. The Forge Fiend goes insanely hard, but I won't worry with the details except for the very end, which was my Forge Fiend, which is essentially a gigantic tank. It's a little guy who has 3 cannons on him. His mouth is a cannon, and he has 2 little cannon arms. But he's like a mechanical dog. He's like a demon engine or whatever. My Forge Fiend was putting in the most work, and he had 1 wound left, and so I charged him into Sarian's sorcerers, all of whom had 1 HP. And when you blow up a tank in Warhammer, they have something called Deadly Demise, where if you roll a 6, they blow up, and everything within 4 inches takes a bunch of automatic damage. And I did, in fact, wipe out Sarian's warlord and leader of his army because my tank blew up on the final turn, which was very satisfying. But yeah, War in the Warp. That's the other thing that's happening. So
very cool.
There you go.
In miniatures world, I played historical miniatures on
it seemed like you were playing a World War II game, which I'm very jealous about. A World War II Flyers, is that right?
Axis and Allies Flyers. It's like the Axis and Allies miniature flying game.
Oh my god,
it was super fun. We were playing as the Japanese versus the Americans. Zeros are very fragile, and Wildcats are not. But we managed.
This is gonna be before Mustangs, huh? Right?
Yeah. This was Guadalcanal. We just
barely. Yeah, that's in 1942.
Barely. You should have been there. You would have known this stuff.
I would have loved this. This is like, God, fuck my whole life. This is absolutely my shtick.
We barely eked out a victory, just because basically like the Zeros have no armor, but they can like we just got really lucky, and like one of my zero ace went down really quickly. The other one managed to just straight out take out a Wildcat on the first turn, just like rolled high enough damage, and then we just managed to slowly pick off all the other planes, and we lost one of our bombers, but we got one of our bombers to drop the bomb, and then we call it a minor victory. We managed to, we had 3 planes left on our side to the one Wildcat, but maneuvering things around would have been difficult, and we got late enough that we called it there. But it was a great time. Highly recommend. It was Phil set up, so the whole kind of like telescope, these telescoping pointers, antennas, greatest idea.
I love them so much. Like I said in the podcast, it makes me want to play Daggers in the Sky super bad. And actually commit myself to writing aerial combat rules or whatever else. So I loved it when we did it for the World War I game, at least.
So for this game too, it's something that you don't have to worry about as much in the World War I game. Is like, or at least for X and Allies, you have to like declare if you're like evading sideways or you're going up or down. And so instead of just having the planes attached to the antennas, he had them glued onto hex nuts. And so if you wanted to pitch up, you just like tilted the plane backwards and it would roll onto the next hex face and it's point up and you can point it down. And if you wanted to go sideways, you could just roll it onto the side of the hex nut. As you had the plane.
Oh, that's so cool.
Flying. It was a great setup. So, the production value is super, super, super crisp.
We've denigrated good production values in miniature things before on this podcast. But I will give credit where it's due that having sweet, telescoping rods on the plexiglass hexes or whatever gets me every time.
Yeah. What else? Other things. I have read several books, and by read several books, I mean listened to them on Audible. Basically, in preparation for playing, Roderick Dick Blackglass. First, I read. So there's two books. The Tainted Cup and a Drop of Corruption, which are these very much kind of like Watson and Holmes style mysteries in this fantasy Roman Empire-ish universe. It's kind of like, it's not quite steampunk because it's not like steam. It's like very alchemical, but it's like that kind of like feeling. And the idea is that in the world there is this big wall, and once a season these Leviathans try and breach the wall and get into the Empire, and they always push them back, and they harvest their bodies, and they make these things that give the characters enhancements, like commonly the policeman will have like enhanced hearing or enhanced senses of smell. Our main character has perfect recall. This is an enhancement that he's gotten. His name is Din. Anna is his boss, who is the Sherlock Holmes type character, and it is very, very rather Sherlock Holmes style mystery, right? Like, you hear the story come out, and eventually the Holmes character figures out the problem, and tells you what happened, and they do it, and it's very much the type of story, but it's very well done. And all of this kind of like Leviathan stuff is kind of the background and the set dressing. It is not as much a central part of the story, which I thought was super interesting. And then I ran out of those books because there's only 2 of them. And so I started reading the Dresden Files again. I'm on like the 6th book of those. And that is just classic kind of like noir detectives, but with a wizard in modern day, in 90s, early aughts Chicago, at least at the point in the timeline where I'm reading them. Apparently the 18th book comes out like next week. So, I've got some catching up to do because like I said, I'm 15 minutes away from finishing the 6th book right now. I was actually listening to it right before we jumped on the cast, but highly recommend the Dresden Files and the Anna and Din mysteries for
hell yeah,
all my readers at home.
I honestly have not been doing all that much game stuff. I wish I had been doing better game stuff, to be honest with you. I'm mostly playing Battlegrounds and getting just so fucking salty at it. Okay. I have a thing that does the math and shows you your percent chance of like winning any like matchup. So anytime you get like it's like really rare you get like a above 90 and lose. It'll be like an 84% win rate and like 16% lose. And when you lose one of those, you just go, fucking, of course, always punish. This always happens to me. I'm furious. You know what I mean? But whatever. I don't know. I just keep playing it because I hate my life. And it's the only thing that has my attention at the video game space right now.
Have you played The Bazaar at all?
I played The Bazaar a long time ago, actually. But yeah, I know a lot about The Bazaar because it's from. Do you know the history of The Bazaar?
No, I saw it. I saw it maybe 6 months ago. I was like, this looks interesting. And then everybody said the monetization model was terrible. And then like,
oh right, yeah,
a couple of weeks ago, I saw it again. It's like, well, they actually made the monetization model not terrible. And so I bought the base set for $20, and so I've been tooling around with it.
The Bazaar started in 2018, 2019. It was designed by a guy named Raynad, who was a Hearthstone streamer for a long time. You might know him famously. He was one of the first streamers to ever put text to speech on his stream, and there were no filters at the time. And so there's the most viral clip that most people know of him is his text to speech on stream, just lots of like racial slurs and like that kind of stuff, because it was like in the earliest days of this technology, and there was not a good way to blacklist it. But anyway, he was a Hearthstone streamer for a long time. He made a bunch of money from that, and then essentially poured all of it into making the Bazaar, which was originally a Hearthstone competitor. It was just a true CCG, right? But then with the rise of auto battlers, they basically scrapped the whole thing and retooled it from the ground up to be an auto battler. So that's obviously what it is now. I have not played it. Funnily enough, I actually played it 4 or 5 years ago for publishing purposes. I basically did a favor for a friend who was like, hey, I'm trying to evaluate whether it is for another company. They were like, we're trying to see whether or not we should invest in the Bazaar. But none of us understand Hearthstone or auto battlers. Can you give us your 2 cents? So they sent me the build, so I got to play the build like a bazillion years ahead of time, which was very cool. And I played it, and I gave a lot of feedback that I have no idea if they took or left or, sort of whatever else. I remember that this was actually the same company that, did I ever tell you the story about fucking owning people in that MOBA? There was an indie MOBA years ago. It was the same group of people. They pinged me for the Hearthstone thing, and they also pinged me for a MOBA. The MOBA story is funnier because we were playing, and this was when I was still playing League of Legends. It must have been 2019. I was playing just like League of Legends still, and I was good at it. And so we played this MOBA, and I went 32 and like 3 or something. So basically, we played this test game to understand if we wanted to publish the MOBA, and then I absolutely housed everyone because I'm just a much better player than they were. So it was like farming, imagine a bunch of middle-aged businessmen sitting down to play League with you, right? Like, that's what it was like. And I was like, I didn't even know what kind of feedback is worthwhile. Anyway, it's that same group. It was a lot of fun. Anyway, I have no idea. I hope the Bazaar is cool. Maybe I will give it a try because I hate Battlegrounds.
Yeah,
and I'm mad about it.
I'm interested for your thoughts on it because part of the thing, I have not played as much Battlegrounds, so I don't really remember how all of it works. But unlike, say, the League of Legends variant, whatever.
TFT.
Yeah, TFT.
Teamfight Tactics.
You're not playing directly against other people. You're mostly like most of your draws are against PvE, and then your fights against other players are against ghosts of other players. They're not actually there when you play them. So you're not actually like doing like this kind of thing where you're drawing out of a pool to try and like pull things away from other players, right? And theoretically, I think you can stop a run in the middle and come back to it later because it's all kind of asynchronous.
That's wild.
Yeah. I've played a handful of rounds. It's one of those things where it's like, I feel like there's just like, I don't have the knowledge base to know what I should be going for. But I also think that like, every time I play one of these auto battlers, I feel myself getting like hard drawn into it and realizing I don't like it that much, but it's just kind of like a cheap junk food that like I think I can just kind of do. And so like I've been tempted several times just to uninstall it. That way I'm not tempted to like, press play and like, because I want to treat it like a game that I can kind of like, play in my, this will be like a quick break. But it's actually longer than that, right? Like a full run's like 30 to 45 minutes. I feel like I had the same problem when I put like Slay the Spire on my phone. It's like, this will be like an easy thing that I could just like take a short break with. And then I ended up taking like way too long breaks playing this types of game. I feel the same way about the Bazaar. I feel the same way about auto battlers in general. It's like, I feel like maybe I just don't actually like auto battlers enough, but it's enough of like a brain worm that it will distract me if I let it. So I don't know.
Yeah. The thing about auto battlers, and the thing I like about Battlegrounds is that it lets me feel like I am really clever. It actually gives me the same sort of feeling that like playing a good game of Magic does, right? Where like my favorite builds in these are called APM builds, which are literally actions per minute. Basically, you go infinite, right? Which is to say you can just keep generating an infinite amount of cards. But you are on a timer because you are not asynchronous. You are synced up with everybody else. So you only have 60 seconds to play your turn. So these builds are, can you do like how much value can you accrue by just pushing, just swapping the cards all around on your screen per turn kind of thing, which is a lot of fun. It's the same kind of, it's the same kind of fun that goes into like winning with Takasia or something kind of like that. APM builds were a lot of fun last season, and they suck right now. The best builds right now are Death Rattle builds, which tend to just kind of be, you play a couple of cards and then you just sort of tune out for, you play 10 seconds worth of cards and then you spend 45 seconds looking at your other screen, which is pretty good when I just want to watch Bob's Burgers or a fucking YouTube, thing or whatever. But even then, I don't know. It doesn't quite do the thing that I really want it to do, which is the like when I'm playing WoW and I can just fully, sublimate the whole process. And I'm mostly listening to the podcast. I'm mostly watching the show. I'm just doing a little bit of something with my hands, right? Auto battlers have this up-down thing where when it requires your interest, you need to spend 100% of your brain on it. You just have to fully disentangle from whatever else the other thing is, which made it practically impossible for me to do anything, outside. Like I said, Bob's Burgers. It's like a fucking sitcom. Who cares? There's no continuity that matters. None of that kind of stuff. I found myself, I was listening to podcasts while I was doing it, and I found myself losing track all the time because I was, taking these 20-second, I have to play my turn breaks, and it was just breaking my concentration enough that I couldn't, get there. But I don't know. We'll see. I hope pre-patch makes me want to farm the Platinum Achievement in WoW again because I don't want to play Battlegrounds, but I'm probably going to load it up right after this ends because I can't stop it. So, yeah, there you go.
Fair enough. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. I don't have anything else I want to talk about. You have anything else you want to talk about?
Nah, yeah, we can close it.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to say, if you wanted to write any comments about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you can email us at dirtfulgames@gmail.com or podcast@dirtfulgames.com. Follow us at twitch.tv/dirtfulgames or youtube.com/dirtfulgames. These go out live. Rate and review us. All the links will be down in the description. Buddy, you have anything you're looking to promote?
The release date for Dead Pets got announced. So February 6th. You want to play Dead Pets? There it is.
Yeah. Well, check that out. With that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.